The first time Theo Delaney saw them, he thought he was hallucinating. After all, who in their right mind would believe two glowing, 7-foot-tall beings crouched behind his greenhouse, gnawing on frost-bitten cucumbers, were real? He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and considered the leftover mushroom risotto he'd eaten for lunch. But the aliens didn't go away. In fact, one of them looked up, blinked its obsidian eyes slowly, and chirped. It wasn't the chirp that got him. It was the unmistakable look of gratitude. Theo lived on the outskirts of Redmond, Washington. His house sat on 5 acres of land that he barely managed to maintain since retirement. 56 years old, divorced, and a former robotics engineer, Theo had settled into a quiet life of failing tomato crops and yelling at deer. It was peaceful. Predictable. Until 2 aliens appeared and changed everything. They were unlike anything he'd ever seen. Slender, silvery-skinned, with elongated limbs and faint bioluminescence that shimmered like moonlight on water. They moved like dancers, all grace and silence. They wore no clothes, but their skin seemed to shift colors slightly in the cold. When he first approached, holding a rake like a weapon, the taller one hissed. The shorter one stumbled and fell into his compost pile. "Jesus Christ," Theo muttered, dropping the rake. "You okay?" The smaller alien blinked up at him and weakly held up a half-eaten cucumber. "You guys, hungry?" He didn't know why he asked. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something in their eyes, desperate and tired. They looked awful, like they hadn't eaten in days. Their skin was dull, their movements sluggish. Against all better judgment, Theo took them inside. He gave them peanut butter sandwiches. The taller one sniffed the bread suspiciously, then licked it. The smaller one devoured theirs in 2 bites, then licked the plate clean. They both chirped. "All right," Theo said, sitting down across from them, still not sure if this was a psychotic break or a government prank. "You two speak English? Any language?" They stared at him. "Okay. Not ideal." He pulled out a notebook and started drawing. A stick figure version of himself, labeled Theo. Then he pointed. "Me. Theo." The aliens looked at each other, then at him. The taller one tapped the page and let out a melodic trill. The shorter one mimicked him. "Theo." Theo grinned. "All right, that's a start." Over the next week, he learned a lot about his uninvited guests. For starters, they were sisters, or at least their equivalent of siblings. He named them Luma and Nora. Luma was the tall one, serious, cautious, always watching. Nora was more curious, prone to poking appliances and trying to eat socks. He still didn't know where they were from. They avoided anything resembling a direct explanation, but their attempts at drawing stars and crashing ships on napkins gave him the general idea. They were stranded. Their ship was damaged, possibly destroyed. They were hiding from something or someone. And they were scared. Theo had never imagined playing host to alien fugitives. He built robots for hospital automation, not for housing extraterrestrial guests. But something about Luma and Nora tugged at him. Maybe it was the way Nora laughed when she discovered hot cocoa. Or how Luma stood at his back porch every night, staring at the sky, whispering in her language. He couldn't kick them out. Even if it meant risking discovery. Which, of course, happened within 2 weeks. The problem began with the chickens. Theo didn't own any. But his neighbor, Marlem Kinney, did. She ran an organic egg farm and was known for being suspicious of anything more advanced than a toaster. One morning, Marla burst onto Theo's property, red-faced and furious. "3 of my hens are missing. Gone. You seen any coyotes around?" "Ah," Theo stammered. "Coyotes? Maybe. Sure." Behind him, Nora's head slowly emerged from the kitchen window, chewing something yellow and feathery. Theo laughed nervously. "Probably raccoons." Marla squinted past him. What the hell was that? Microwave. That didn't sound like no microwave. He deflected, changed the subject, and managed to get her off his porch, but the damage was done. Luma scolded Nora in their sing-song language, and Nora sulked for hours. Theo installed blackout curtains and made a mental note to keep all feathered temptations far from reach. That night, the sisters brought him a gift. It looked like a crystal, smooth and glowing faintly blue. About the size of a plum. Luma presented it with solemn reverence. Theo took it, unsure what to do. "Thanks," he said, rotating it in his hand. "Ah, what is it?" Nora pointed to the house. Then to the crystal. Then she made a whooshing sound and mimed flying. "A power source. For your ship." Luma nodded. "So, why give it to me?" They stared at him. Theo sighed. "You guys are gonna get me killed." Later that night, the power in his house surged. Lights flickered, the microwave beeped for no reason, and his Roomba started dancing erratically. The crystal pulsed, then dimmed. Theo placed it in a metal bowl and covered it with a pot lid. The next morning, 3 black SUVs rolled into Redmond. Theo saw them from his front window, sipping coffee. The men wore dark suits and sunglasses. One carried a briefcase. Another had a drone. He knew what they were. Government types. Alphabet soup agencies. And they were knocking on doors. "Time to go," he told the sisters. They didn't understand his words, but they understood his tone. Luma nodded, grabbed Nora, and followed him out the back. Theo led them to his old barn. It hadn't housed animals in decades, but it still had a working lock and plenty of hiding spots. "Stay here. Don't make a sound. Don't eat any chickens." They nodded. The agents arrived an hour later. Clean-shaven, polite, and asking about unusual aerial phenomena. "You mean UFOs?" Theo asked, sipping his coffee. "Didn't know we were still using that term. Have you seen anything out of the ordinary, Mr. Delaney? Strange lights, odd weather patterns, unfamiliar individuals?" Theo shook his head. "Just deer. Lots of deer." They left him a card. That night, Luma and Nora slept in his living room. Theo stayed up, staring at the crystal. He had a decision to make. Keep hiding them, or find a way to get them home. He chose the latter. But first, he needed a plan. He dug out his old blueprints. Half-finished drone designs, early prototypes for autonomous shuttles, solar array circuits. He hadn't touched this stuff in years. The sisters helped. Luma seemed to understand technical diagrams better than he did. Nora just liked playing with wires. The work began slowly, secretly. Nights spent soldering and coding. Days spent pretending to be normal. He bought parts online, small orders from dozens of vendors. Used his old contacts discreetly. Said he was building a greenhouse AI. The sisters learned quickly. Too quickly. Within days, they modified his design. Added stabilizers, built a compact energy converter using parts from his toaster and the alien crystal. It started to look less like a drone and more like, well, a ship. And Theo, for the first time in years, felt alive. Then Nora got sick. It started with lethargy. She stopped exploring. Stopped eating. Her glow faded. Luma was frantic. She tried different foods, wrapped Nora in blankets, even offered Theo the crystal, as if he could do something. He took Nora to the barn. Laid her on a mattress and checked her vitals with an old med scanner. Nothing human came up. She was dying. Theo made a choice. He went to Marla. Told her he found a sick animal. Asked for antibiotics. She gave him some, reluctantly. He returned to Nora, crushed the pills, and prayed. She recovered slowly. But she recovered. Luma wept. They brought him another crystal. Theo stared at it. "You know, I'm starting to think you two are more than just castaways." They didn't answer. But outside, the agents were getting closer. The first thing Theo noticed was the silence. Redmond wasn't a loud town, but it had its usual symphony of distant highway hums, chirping birds, and the occasional leaf blower. But now there was none of it. Just a tense, unnatural stillness that prickled the hairs on the back of his neck. He stepped outside, squinting into the late afternoon haze, and spotted it, a glint of black glass in the sky. A drone, circling high above. Back inside, Luma was already at the window, her glow dimmed. Nora, recovered but not at full strength, sat curled in a blanket nest, sipping miso soup Theo had bribed a ramen shop to sell early that morning. Theo didn't need to say anything. The sisters had already seen the drone. They were watching too. The timing was no coincidence. Someone knew. Not everything, maybe, but enough. The agents had poked around for days, asking more pointed questions. There'd been reports of strange energy readings. Livestock behaving oddly. A farmer 2 towns over said his tractor refused to start unless he sang to it. It wasn't just a hunt anymore. It was a containment operation. Theo's ship, the makeshift shuttle cobbled together with alien ingenuity and surplus parts from his failed startup, was nearing completion. It sat in the barn, half concealed under a top and surrounded by tools and energy converters. But it wasn't ready. And the sisters wouldn't survive long if they were captured. That night, the lights flickered again. Theo turned off every breaker, pulled the curtains shut, and laid out every contingency plan he could think of. There was no more waiting. They had to finish the shuttle. And they had to leave. Luma and Noro understood. In their quiet way, they were already preparing. Noro had been assembling what looked like a hybrid interface out of Theo's old VR headset, a bicycle chain, and the shell of an iMac. Luma recalibrated the energy core, whispering instructions to it as if it were alive. Theo handled the wiring and propulsion systems. He barely slept. Adrenaline fueled him, but so did something else, a growing sense of responsibility. He'd started as a host. Then a helper. Now he was their last hope. And they were his reason to believe he still mattered. 3 days into the sprint, things got worse. The barn was broken into. He found the lock pried open, some of the top pushed aside. Nothing was missing, but someone had seen it. Someone knew. He installed cameras. Rigged traps, non-lethal ones, and made sure to keep the sisters inside at all times. He slept with an old wrench under his pillow. 2 nights later, he caught one. Not a government agent. Not even a local. A teenager. She was skinny, maybe 16, wearing a school hoodie and a GoPro strapped to her chest. When Theo caught her in the barn, she screamed and tried to run. He grabbed her by the backpack and pulled her down. Whoa. Whoa. I'm not gonna hurt you. Let me go. I have followers. People will know if I disappear. Jesus, Theo muttered. You're a streamer? Urban explorer, she snapped. Theo took the GoPro. Watched the last 30 seconds. Aliens, she'd whispered. Oh my God. Real-life aliens. He exhaled slowly. This could spiral out of control. He sat her down in the kitchen. Luma and Noro stayed hidden. What's your name? Jaya. All right, Jaya. Listen carefully. What you saw back there, it's not public knowledge. And it can't be. I knew it. They're real. I knew it. Please, he said, softer now. They're not hurting anyone. They're just trying to go home. She hesitated. They looked scared. They are. Jaya didn't post the footage. Theo let her keep the GoPro, wiped the files, and gave her a story about advanced drone tech. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was something. She left, promising silence. But Theo knew secrets didn't last. And the agents were getting closer. 3 more SUVs showed up that weekend. One parked down the road, pretending to be broken down. Another flew a drone over Theo's roof at 3 a.m. The third stopped him on his morning walk. Mr. Delaney, said the lead agent, a broad man with a monotone voice and eyes like chipped glass. We're concerned about a pattern of anomalies in this area. We'd appreciate your cooperation. Theo smiled. Of course. Always happy to help. That night, he buried the energy cores in a false floor beneath the barn. The sisters started sleeping in the crawlspace. He accelerated the timeline. The launch date moved from eventually to tomorrow night. But they still needed a launch signal, something to guide the shuttle to their people. Theo didn't have the range. The forest behind his property, however, did. Specifically, the abandoned telecom tower that had been out of commission since the late 90s. He'd passed it 1,000 times hiking. Never thought he'd need it to send aliens home. The climb was brutal. Rusted stairs, broken supports, raccoons that did not want visitors. He hauled up the modified transmitter jury-rigged from his ham radio, Luma's energy crystal, and a salvaged microwave magnetron. The device powered on. A low, rhythmic hum filled the air. Luma watched, silent. Then she raised a hand. The humming changed pitch. Higher. Then lower. Then, a tone. A sequence. A message. Theo didn't know what it said, but Luma looked at him, eyes bright, and nodded. Signal sent. Now, they waited. For what? Theo wasn't sure. Rescue? Retaliation? The agents moved in the next day. Full blackout operation. Drones. EM jammers. Ground teams in camo. Theo heard boots crunching outside his house and hid Luma and Nora in the basement. The shuttle was moved to the woods under a top of mylar and moss. They came at 2 a.m. knocked first. When he didn't answer, they broke the door. Mr. Delaney, barked the lead agent. We have reason to believe you are harboring illegal entities. Step aside. Theo tried bluffing. Denied everything. They found the basement hatch. But Luma and Nora were gone. Theo had built a tunnel, crude, barely large enough to crawl through, but effective. It led under the fence line, out into the forest. The agents searched the house. Found nothing but the crystal. Took it. Theo was taken into custody. They asked questions. Dozens. Threatened charges. Spoke in acronyms. He said nothing. They held him for 36 hours. By the time he was released, the shuttle was gone. So were Luma and Nora. But something was left behind. A note. Scribbled in imperfect English. Burned slightly at the edges. Theo. Thank you. We no forget. Gift left. Use wise. The crystal was gone. But in its place was something else. A box. Inside, a black disc. Smooth. Cool to the touch. And humming faintly. Theo stared at it. Then he laughed. Because somehow, despite everything, he knew they were safe. He knew they'd made it. And now he had a new mystery. A new purpose. Because the disc wasn't just a thank you. It was technology. Advanced. Beautiful. Full of potential. And it wasn't from this world. Theo rolled up his sleeves, plugged in his soldering iron, and got to work. The agents still watched him. Let them. He had aliens to thank. And a future to build. The sky turned the color of ash just as Theo powered up the disc. He hadn't touched it for days, not out of fear, but because he knew whatever it did, it would change everything. The last gift from Luma and Nora sat silently on his workbench, humming softly, vibrating with some unseen rhythm. He'd cleared his entire garage, laid out every sensor, oscilloscope, and radiation meter he had. And still, nothing could truly explain what the black disk was doing. Until it activated. No button. No prompt. Just a ripple of light across the surface and then, suddenly, it spoke. Not with words, but with geometry. Holograms unfolded in the air above it. Spinning wireframes of unknown constellations, pulsing equations, and structures that rearranged themselves every few seconds. Theo stared, overwhelmed. But his brain, honed by years of engineering and problem-solving, kicked into gear. It was a schematic. A manual. A message. And a warning. The disk contained data far more than his equipment could even begin to decode. The first thing he did was isolate power flow. The moment he tapped into the core frequency, all of Redmond experienced a blackout. The power surge lit up every meter in town. Streetlights went dark. Drones fell from the sky. And somewhere, Theo imagined a dozen red flags firing in government bunkers. He didn't care. The disk showed him a device. A beacon. A communicator. It wasn't clear. But it was something big. And it needed to be built. For 3 days, Theo didn't sleep. He assembled a new team not of people, but of autonomous bots. His old prototype fabrication drones, long since retired, were modified, given new code, new arms, and a new purpose. They began constructing components he only half understood. But then came the knock. Not the government. Not Marla. Not a curious teenager with a GoPro. It was Jaya. This time, she looked different. Older. Or maybe just more serious. Her hoodie was gone, replaced by a dark jacket and thick gloves. She held a tablet. "You're building it," she said without preamble. Theo narrowed his eyes. "You know what it is?" She stepped inside. "Not exactly. But I've seen the patterns. Something big is coming. And people are noticing. Not just here. Globally." Theo poured coffee. "Why are you here?" She held up the tablet. "Because I've been tracking an encrypted frequency since the night you powered that disk. It's bouncing off satellites, low orbit, ground towers. And it's accelerating." Theo took the tablet. Scanned the readouts. It was true. The signal Luma sent, the one from the telecom tower, had triggered something. A response. A ship. It was coming. But so was something else. The disk pulsed harder as if sensing the urgency. The holograms changed. This time, Theo saw shapes that made his stomach twist. Angular forms. Ships of war. Entire fleets. He turned to Jaya. It wasn't just a rescue call. It was a beacon. A flare. "And it got noticed by more than just the good guys," she whispered. Theo stood, every part of him buzzing. "We need to finish this device. Whatever it is. It's not just communication, it's defense." The construction accelerated. Theo and Jaya worked in shifts, using AI routines, custom-built arms, and salvaged tech from scrapyards. The device, built in the skeleton of the barn where Luma and Nora once hid, grew taller each day. It looked almost like a spire, sleek, obsidian, humming with internal energy. Then came the first sign of arrival. At 2:17 a.m., the sky over Redmond cracked open. Not literally, but to the naked eye, it may as well have. A rift shimmered above the treetops. Stars bent. Light pulsed erratically. And from the breach came 3 ships, sleek, silent, and utterly alien. Theo rushed outside, shielding his eyes. They hovered. Observing. And then a second rift opened. What emerged was not sleek. It was angular. Brutal. Covered in ridges and barbs. And unlike the first 3 ships, it didn't observe. It attacked. The sky turned to fire. The friendly ships dispersed, lasers flaring silently. The new arrival unleashed a volley of plasma toward the earth, toward the barn. Theo and Jaya dove into the crawlspace just as the shockwave hit. The entire side of the garage blew out. Wood and metal screamed. Theo's bots exploded in sparks. And then, the spire activated. The black disk, still embedded in the device's heart, unleashed a wave. Not visible light. Not heat. Something deeper. Time slowed. Theo blinked and found himself standing. The attacking ship frozen mid-fire. The friendly ships illuminated in bright energy fields. And then, a voice. Not heard. Felt. Theo Delaney. Custodian. Defender. He gasped. "What?" The disk spoke again. "This world. Registered. Primitive. Under sanctuary. You're protecting us?" The spire lit up, sending a beam into the sky. The angular ship hissed, its energy matrix dissolving. It shimmered. Vanished. The friendly ships rotated, hovered. Then one descended. It landed. And out stepped Luma. Theo choked on breath. Luma. She looked different, armored now. Confident. Glowing fully. She stepped forward. Nora followed. Behind them, 2 beings in silver cloaks carried something. A crest. Theo recognized the sigil, it was on the disk. "You did it," Luma said. "You built it." Theo laughed. Didn't have much of a choice. Jaya, slack-jawed, stepped forward. "You know them?" Luma nodded. "This is the one who fed us. Who hid us. Who risked everything." Nora trilled. "We come to return the favor." Theo stared. "Wait. You came back. You didn't have to." Luma placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're sisters now. You are kin." From above, more ships descended. Friendly. Peacekeeping. The danger was gone. For now. But Earth was on the map. Theo knew this was only the beginning. The disk was more than a tool. It was a key. And it had chosen him. As dawn broke over Redmond, Theo stood in the ruins of his barn, flanked by aliens and a teenage explorer, staring at a future more complex and more hopeful than he'd ever imagined. The world had changed. And so had he. He wasn't just a host anymore. He was humanity's first emissary. And he had work to do. Theo Delaney stood in what remained of his barn, watching the morning sun pierce through the jagged wooden beams. The soft hum of alien ships above cast long shadows on the earth, their presence strange yet oddly comforting. Around him, a dozen engineers, some human, some not, were already at work repairing what had been destroyed during the battle. And at the center of it all stood the spire, now stabilized, glowing faintly with the same pulse that once came from the black disk. He took a deep breath. It was over. At least, the worst of it. The earth hadn't been scorched. No invasion fleets had rained fire. Thanks to the device he and the sisters built, thanks to Luma's return, they'd made their point. This planet was not unprotected. Not forgotten. And not alone. Jaya stood beside him, a notepad in hand, scribbling rapidly. She'd refused to leave, even when offered safe passage to a secure site. "This is history," she had said. "I'm not missing a single page." Luma approached, her armored silhouette reflecting dawn light. She walked with purpose, but softer now, more relaxed. Nora followed, munching on a granola bar and humming a tune she'd learned from Theo's radio. "You did well, Theo," Luma said. "I had help," he replied. "You showed courage. Compassion. These are rare qualities, even among our kind." Theo chuckled. "I'm just a retired engineer with a weird garden and no social life." Luma tilted her head. "And yet you fed 2 starving refugees. Risked your freedom. Built a defense beacon that repelled a warship. Not so ordinary, Theo." He looked around at the workers, the ships, the sky. "I never wanted this. I mean, I never thought any of this would happen." "That's what makes your actions genuine," she said. "Not ambition. Empathy." Jaya looked up from her notes. "What happens now?" Luma gestured toward the horizon. "Now we teach. We share. Quietly, for now. But in time, your world will be ready." Theo raised an eyebrow. "Ready for what?" Nora, now sitting on a tractor, shouted, "Ready for party." Everyone laughed. The tension, the fear, it all broke for a moment in that simple absurdity. But later, as the ships lifted off and the sky began to return to normal, the weight of it all settled back on Theo's shoulders. He walked alone to the telecom tower, climbed it one last time, and looked out over the valley. Redmond was still there. Still the same. But it wasn't. The agents never returned. Whatever agencies had been tracking him seemed to vanish into the fog of plausible deniability. Maybe the aliens had intervened. Maybe his role had earned him a kind of immunity. Jaya got a scholarship and a non-disclosure agreement, though she continued to help quietly, documenting everything from a secure digital vault. Theo received one more gift before Luma departed. A seed. It was no bigger than a fingernail. But when planted in his ruined greenhouse, it grew fast. Within days, a tree-like structure emerged, covered in glowing leaves and humming with a low, peaceful tone. It acted as a relay, connecting Earth to the stars, not for war, but for dialogue. He didn't broadcast its existence. Not yet. Some truths, he'd learned, needed time. Every week, he sat by the tree with a notebook. Not to record data, but to reflect. He didn't see himself as a hero. He was a man who made a choice to help others in need. The consequences had been far-reaching, but the core of it, feeding 2 strangers, remained beautifully simple. And maybe that was the moral of it all. The universe is vast. Dangerous. Mysterious. But in the end, the most powerful thing you can do, the thing that changes galaxies, is choose kindness. Theo never looked at the stars the same way again. He didn't see cold, unreachable fire. He saw sisters. He saw second chances. He saw the strength in a peanut butter sandwich and the ripple effect of a small, decent act. And as the tree glowed quietly behind him, linking his world to countless others, he knew one thing for certain. The future belonged to those who helped. And he had helped. Not by fighting. Not by leading. But by feeding the hungry, sheltering the lost, and building something no weapon could destroy. Trust. He smiled to himself, picked a glowing fruit from the tree, and took a bite. It tasted like victory. Like home.